So let's talk about looms. When I was learning to do Sprang, I took a class at Penzic, and part of the class was to buy, if you wanted to, a kit for a Sprang loom. And this is my kit that I got, and it is PVC, very simple, 12 by 24 with elbow joints, and it just goes together by pushing it together. There's no glue involved. So if you don't have something that you can use for a loom at home, you can purchase these and cut these to size and make a loom with PVC. Another type of loom that you could use is actually like a picture frame or any sort of a wooden frame that you can use to stretch your warp between. This is actually something a friend made for me, and it turned out that it was a little too short for my needs, but if you're doing Sprang on a shorter scale, this works great. The next type of loom that he made for me was slightly longer. It's just ever so slightly larger than the PVC loom that I started with. And this has worked great. But then I really wanted to try out a floor loom. And this one is based on ones that you find in manuscripts of women doing Sprang. And I'll just show you what it looks like there. And hopefully you could see that. And I've got it ready to go. I'm going to do some Sprang later. And another type of loom I've actually seen is if you take a very springy branch or a small sapling and you just bend it sort of into a U shape and then tie the ends together with some sort of a strong twine or string, that could also work as a Sprang loom. So next we'll get started on warping our Sprang loom. All right, so this one is ready to be warped. So I wanted to show you what it looked like when it was ready. Here's one that is not set up for warping. This is actually my original one that I purchased at Penzic. This is going to be the top and then the bottom. Mark that with a Sharpie just so you don't lose track. You're going to need a couple of dowels or knitting needles. Place those inside the frame about 2 inches away from the edges. You're going to need 4 pieces of string. These are about 10 inches long and they're folded in half and knotted at the ends. And I'm just placing these where they will go. And then you're going to need 2 longer pieces of yarn that is a little bit longer and doubled, of course, than your the space between your 2 dowels. So just loop those shorter pieces of yarn onto your frame and sort of just hang those dowels inside like that. And do that on the other side too. Mine, I realized, are a little too short, and I had to replace 2 of them with some longer loops because as you do Sprang, the warp strings shorten because you're twisting them together. So if you have a little bit longer loops than what I have here, that makes it so that you can adjust the tension of your warp strings. All right, so I've got those on. The next thing you're going to do is tie knots at the ends of each of those longer pieces and then loop those onto the outside edges of or ends of the dowels. Because they're loose right now, you can sort of wrap the ends around a couple of times just so that you get a little more tension between the dowels. All right, you are ready to start warping. I'm using just a crochet yarn, sort of a washcloth yarn. It's cotton and very simple to use. And what you're going to do is start off by tying one end of your yarn to the bottom, and you're going to wrap around to the back, to the front, to the back. It's sort of a spiral wrap. You're going to do this so that you have 20 loops when you're done. So when I count my loops, I'm looking at the number of loops at the top of the dowel. That's what I'm counting. I'm not counting the front yarn and the back yarn. I'm counting how many are at on the dowel itself. You want to keep your wraps fairly loose, not super taut, and make sure that you don't cross them over each other. Make sure they're in a nice line. And when you're done, cut off the yarn and tie it onto the bottom dowel again. So we're going to do the plait row first, and what you're going to need is 4 bamboo skewers. Put those aside for now, and place your left hand between the front and back threads. And with the right thumb and index finger, you're going to pick up the first 2 right hand threads of the back layer and bring them forward. And then the front layer goes back. And then for the rest of that row until you get to the end, you're going to pull 1 forward, push 1 back, pull 1 forward, push 1 back, and so on. When you get to the end of that row, you'll notice that you have 2 in the front and 1 in the back. So you just pull that 1 from the back forward and push those 2 into the back layer. Take your right hand and sort of slide it down to tighten the twist at the bottom. And then using one of your skewers, place it between the 2 layers in the shed. Next, we're going to do the overplait row. And the overplait row is just 1 forward from the back and 1 back. 1 forward, 1 back, 1 forward, 1 back. So go from the back to the front and the front to the back, all the way across. Next, you're going to repeat the plait row. Remember, 2 from the back and 1 from the front. And once you've done that 1 stitch, you do 1 forward, 1 back, all the way across until you get to the end where you have 2 in front that you push to the back and 1 from the back that you pull to the front. Slide down to tighten that twist and place your bamboo skewer between the 2 layers in the shed. And again, you will repeat your overplait row. That's just 1 forward, 1 back, all the way across. At some point you're going to run out of skewers, so you'll have to remove skewers as you go. So take the bottom one out and put it into the top when you need to reuse them. This is what happens if you make a mistake and you forget where you were. So just take out your hands, take that last skewer, slide it up and down again, and restart that row. Where I went wrong was I was supposed to do a plate row instead. So now you can see that the strings are crossing each other as they should. What happens if you forget where you were? Well, what you do is you count how many are forward on the rightmost side. And if 2 are forward, you know you have to do an overplate row. And if 1 is forward, you know you need to do a plate row. So 2 from the back, and then 1 to the back. You might find that it gets hard at some point to get your fingers in between the layers. You can just squeeze your hands in there as long as you can. Eventually, you can start removing those placeholders, those dowels or skewers, so that you have a little more room for your hands. Just be careful. So you can see here that I have removed most of my skewers so that I can get my fingers in there. You could also use a safety string if a skewer is too much in your way. It just doesn't really keep the layers separate like a dowel or a skewer would. So you can see I've gone about as far as I can without breaking my fingers. So let's finish this up. So take your longest piece of yarn and thread it on a tapestry needle. And once you've done that, you can then very carefully thread it between the front and back layers of your Sprang. And once you've done that, you can remove the skewer, that last skewer. Try to make sure that there are even amounts of yarn on either side of your Sprang piece. Thread one of the shorter pieces of yarn onto your tapestry needle. And this is a little bit scary here because you are now removing the larger dowels. So just very carefully thread your needle through that loop and make sure that you go between the layers and don't miss any loops. Repeat this process on the other side. You'll just need to squidge the twists a little bit back and forth to even out that middle area so that it's not super loose. It just takes a little bit of time to squidge it around to get things evened out. All right, now you can fold the whole thing in half. This takes a little bit of patience because Sprang likes to curl. Those pieces of string are so very much in the way. Just be careful not to mix them up. Lay it out nicely. Now, what I did here was I pinned it down to a piece of foam core so that I could show you how to whip stitch the sides closed without the whole bag curling up on me. Again, you're going to take your tapestry needle and you're going to thread one side of the long piece of yarn onto it, and then basically just whip stitch the sides closed up to the top. And then you're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. Make a little knot at the top to keep your whip stitches from coming out. If you want your pouch to cinch closed, you're just going to continue the drawstring around to the other side on each side, as shown. Trim off any extra bits of string or yarn, and then you can flip the whole thing right side out, and you have made a pouch. Depending on how tight you do Sprang, your pouch might be pretty loose or it might be tighter. Because I've been doing Sprang for a while, mine is pretty tight. But my first one was pretty loose, and it's still pretty and does the trick. It's a very stretchy material. Pretty cool. I hope you give Sprang a try and make your own Sprang pouch. So this is some Sprang made from, actually used crochet cotton. And this is a pattern that was made based on the Tree of Life motif from one of the extant pieces from Langberg Castle. And here I'm just showing you how stretchy it is. It was originally used in the central panel of headwear. So, pretty cool. Thanks for watching my video. Have a great day.